midnight screams.
I had to reread the title a few times until I finally believed what I was reading. Yup, that was my name. Alright. I retrieved a Diet Mountain Dew from my mini fridge, letting the tasty bubbles glide down my throat as I scrolled lower down the page. My dorm room lights were off, and my laptop screen provided the only reprieve from the all-encompassing darkness. It was a normal Friday night. My random dormmate, Ethan, was probably at some seedy bar, passing off his fake ID and trying to talk to women. Thank God he wasn't more successful, or else I would have had to endure the same number of sexiles that my only real friend, Oscar, had to. Oscar's roommate had a long-term girlfriend, and they weren't very understanding towards Oscar, kicking him out at least once a week. I pushed for him to talk to Residential Life, but he promised me they wouldn't do anything about it. I looked back at my screen. I spent a lot of Friday nights scrolling this site, losing myself in all the fun and scary stories people made up. This article, though, was different. It had been uploaded only a few hours ago, and it was talking about a new deadly entity, me. Born in 2007, this entity is classified as highly erratic and dangerous, with several confirmed kills as well as numerous other suspected deaths. If one wishes to avoid certain danger, the following steps must be followed. 1. Do not look into its eyes. His pupils dilate when he's curious, releasing a pheromone that makes it tempting to stare. Warning: his eyes may not always be in the same place on his face. 2. If you hear a rattle and click, he is near. Play dead. You must have your face pointing towards the sky, eyes closed. If you are inside, do everything in your power to get outside before it's too late. 3. If your arm hair follicles dig deeper into your skin, he is flying overhead. It will feel extremely uncomfortable, maybe even painful, depending on how hairy your arms are. But this is a natural evolutionary reaction for survival. It might be wise to trim some of your arm hair, but it would be a mistake to trim them all, as you will lose this line of defense. 4. Nev. The screen went white. Site no longer found. I blinked down at my screen in disgust. Was this some sort of weird joke? Some creative project? Some sort of Chrome extension that changed the name and year for whoever was reading the article? Was one of my friends from high school playing some stupid prank? I pressed refresh at least 5 times. I tried a different browser. I tried my phone. No success. My phone buzzed to life. A phone call from Oscar. I went and turned on my light, a little too paranoid to still be chilling in the dark. "Hello?" I croaked. "Yo, dude, you down to smoke?" Emmett and his girlfriend already took over the room. I hesitated before answering. Oscar? "Yeah, what's up, bro? Do you mind looking something up for me really fast?" After a short pause. "Why can't you look it up?" "It's not working on my phone or laptop. Not sure if it will be any different, but I guess I can check something out." "Thanks, bro. Can you look up?" I told him the name of the site. He had me spell it out for him. "Sorry, Wyatt," Oscar responded. "The site won't load on my phone either. What is that site even? Sounds weird. I'll tell you about it later. Want to meet up at our usual spot?" "See you there," he replied before hanging up. I grabbed a coat. Oscar and I went to school in Washington, and it got a little chilly this time of year. I was still a little on edge from the website, but figured I would have a lot of that edge melt away in about 30 minutes when I saw Oscar. I debated siphoning off some of Ethan's vodka in a water bottle, but decided against it. I think he was still suspicious the last time I did that. Oscar, and I had found a nice patch of woods that weren't monitored during our first month on campus. It was only around 15 minutes from my dorm and just under 20 from Oscar's. I popped in some AirPods and strolled over to the woods, trying to find a logical explanation for the website. Ultimately, I decided it wasn't worth the stress as I arrived at our spot, an area dimly lit by a few streetlights, but still giving us our anonymity. "Hey, just got to the spot," I texted Oscar. I sat on the grass, refreshing the site with still no luck, when I heard feet shuffling nearby. "Oscar?" I asked aloud. There was no response as I heard it getting louder. Who's there?" I stuttered. I saw Oscar's red curls push into my field of vision. He was shaking, but gave a sympathetic smile. "Sorry about that. Were you trying to find me?" He replied, plopping down on the grass next to me. "You got the stuff?" I asked, maybe a little too eagerly, bordering on impatiently. "What was with that website earlier?" Oscar said abruptly. I felt my face blushing. "I can tell you all about it while we smoke." I forced out a chuckle. "I think we should check it again, right?" There was no humor in Oscar's voice. "We definitely can later. I mean, we have all night." My heart started beating more rapidly. "Let's just check it now," Oscar commanded. At that moment, I realized he didn't seem to have come with his usual backpack of supplies. I anxiously reached for my phone and reloaded the site. "What does it say now?" Oscar inquired with a grin. The site seemed to have come back to life. I started to speak aloud. 4. Never ask a question. He can only ask questions. Speak in definitive statements when speaking to the entity. My left arm began to twitch, itchy at first, until I suddenly felt a sharp pain spreading deep into my skin. "Ah!" I cried out, soothing my arm with my other hand. "Are you okay?" Oscar's eyes twinkled as he dipped his head closer. "I'm fine. It's just..." I rubbed my arm. I looked down at my skin. I couldn't see my hair, but it felt like little needles were pricking my arm. I looked back down at my screen. 3. If your arm hair follicles dig deeper into your skin, he is flying overhead. I looked up in a panic. Then I heard it. Asterisk. Rattle asterisk asterisk. Click asterisk. Oscar, play dead. Close your eyes. Just play dead. Close your eyes, I said in a frantic panic. "You are acting weird, don't you think?" I didn't care what he thought. I rolled over on my stomach, forcing my eyes shut, not moving a muscle. I felt my lip trembling. "Oscar, don't ask any questions. We can't ask any questions." I peeked out with one eye towards him. He was still sitting upright, looking at me with confusion. I heard something stomping nearby. "Oscar, please, for the love of God, just do what I say." "Hey, who are you?" Oscar asked. Asterisk. Rattle. Asterisk. Asterisk. Click. Asterisk. Don't you recognize me? The voice felt familiar, something I only heard in videos of myself or voice memos. "Your eyes," Oscar replied, before I heard a rush of intense breathing. I heard something thud on the ground. I lay there motionless for 5 minutes as the stomping seemed to circle our patch before I didn't hear any more noises. I peeked towards where Oscar had been. He was gone. "Oscar! I can't see you!" I whisper shouted. I carefully crept up to my feet, pulling my phone out to finish the article. 5. If a friend disappears with the entity near, the entity has grabbed them. They will still appear. Do not trust them. Do not reason with them. Do not contact the police. Return home within an hour, and if it... The article cut off, not because of a site crash this time. Just the article literally stopped. I looked out into the forest. I saw Oscar about 50 feet away. His face basked in the light. His head was jolted to the side, eyes rolled up towards the sky, mouth open. His hands were held straight out to the side, as if he were being crucified on a cross. I took a few paces backwards from him, as I saw his whole body start to shake. Oscar's jaw began to unhinge, stretching wider than any human mouth should open. A gray arm suddenly pushed out from between his teeth, fingers splaying as they gripped the corner of his mouth from the inside. The flesh of his cheeks pulled taut, straining like rubber about to snap. But it didn't snap. It just kept stretching. Another arm thrust out, this one gripping Oscar's lower jaw, wrenching it down further. His mouth yawned open impossibly wide, his face distorting as the skin around his lips and cheeks stretched paper-thin, almost translucent. Then a head emerged, pale gray, bulbous, with eyes that didn't belong in any socket I recognized. It pushed through Oscar's gaping mouth, and as it did, Oscar's entire face stretched around it, like a latex mask being pulled over a balloon. Oscar's body began to collapse inward, deflating. His arms and torso seemed to fold and compress as the entity pulled itself free, using his stretched skin like a discarded costume. It was peeling off from the inside. The body crumpled to the ground in a heap of loose, empty flesh, boneless, flattened, like clothes left on the forest floor. The gray skin faded into the same orangish pale as mine. The entity sprouted raven black hair, the unique trait my mom would use to spot me in a crowd of people. In the half-second before I looked away and sprinted, it was clear that was me, but it was wrong. The site said I had an hour, but I made it back to my dorm faster than I ever had before. It was probably chasing me. I didn't bother looking back. I heard my voice floating behind me. "Can't you just turn around? Don't you want to meet?" When I got back to the dorm, I nearly barreled over people in the hallway. I didn't care what they thought of me. I had to get back. I ripped open my dorm door before slamming it shut. Ethan was sitting on his bed, a Miller Lite in hand. "Dude, what's wrong with you?" he slurred out. I didn't bother to answer. I raced over to my laptop, clicked refresh, and scrolled down to the author. I clicked his profile and typed out, "Your article stopped. The entity has my name. It got my friend. It's chased me. How do I escape it?" I prayed for a response as Ethan continued to ramble on with questions. My heart kept pounding as tears began to well up in my eyes. Asterisk, knock, asterisk, asterisk, knock times. My eyes shot towards the door. I looked over at Ethan as he slowly turned his body and rose to his feet. "Ethan, don't answer that door," I screamed. He looked at me in confusion as he took a sloppy step forward. "I swear to God, Ethan," I cried out. "You answer that door, and we both are going to die." Ethan hesitated before flopping back into his bed. Asterisk. Knock. Asterisk. Asterisk. Knock. Times. Ethan looked longingly at the door. I did too. Even though I knew what monster was waiting behind that door, something in me needed to open it. Ethan shot back up and rushed towards the door. I tackled him, easily overpowering him in his drunken stupor. I heard something in the hallway stomp away. Stop being a freak. What's wrong with you? He asked as I sat over him. I heard my laptop ding. I forced Ethan up and shoved him back into his bed. The author had responded, "If it knocks, let it in. It will knock twice, 2 times. Listen to your instincts. Answer the door. If you ignore him and do not answer, he will find another way in." I stared at the screen, my stomach dropping. I had wanted to open it. Every fiber of my being had screamed to open that door, but I hadn't. Something scratched inside the wall. I'm not sure where else to turn, so here it goes. I'm hoping someone on here has experience with uncontrollable laughing, because this is torture. My body aches. My head's pounding from dehydration. My throat so raw it started bleeding, and I've cracked several ribs. I called 911, but they think it's a prank. It started 5 days ago. My partner, Kate, and I pulled up to our last liquor store of the day before our shift ended. We work in alcohol beverage control, and while it's technically a law enforcement job and we carry weapons, I had never once in 12 years discharged my gun outside of a range. Until 5 days ago. It should have been a run-of-the-mill license check to make sure the store wasn't selling anything they weren't legally allowed to sell. I sensed something was off immediately. The Mexican lunch special I'd eaten a few hours earlier felt like it was staging a revolt in my stomach. We heard shouting as soon as we stepped out of the vehicle. Should I call it in? Kate asked. I shook my head, wanting to gauge the situation first. Fights are common enough in liquor stores, but it took a moment to figure out what was off about this one. Only one person was shouting. The other person was laughing. The sun was still bright enough overhead that I could only see reflections in the windows, but when I stepped into the shade of an old oak, the picture inside became clear. The laughing was coming from a man in a hoodie. He clutched his ribs with one hand, the other aiming what appeared to be a gun at the clerk. "Gun!" I hissed. "Call it." Kate rushed to the car to radio for backup as I stooped lower, tasting acid and chimichanga as I crouched and crept closer. It wasn't the situation that made me nauseous. It was the laugh. Even muffled through the door, it sounded unhinged. I could hear Kate on the radio, informing units in the area of a suspected armed robbery. The glint of the sunshine off the vehicle's window must have caught the guy's attention, because he turned and looked outside. Aside from the patchy beard that was starting to fill in with stubble, the guy was a clean-cut white guy with blonde hair in his late 20s. It was hard to tell through the laughter, but he looked relieved, like he was glad we'd shown up. He made for the exit. Kate returned to my side, gun drawn as well, just as the guy stepped out. Without the glass buffer, it was so much worse. His mouth hung open like a scream frozen in time. Tears streamed down his cheeks from eyes crimson with burst blood vessels. His skin looked sunburned, it was so red from the strain. And that laugh, not the way a drunk laughs, more like a dying clown's giggle. It was shrill and wheezy, broken only by raspy gasps for breath. "Drop the weapon!" I yelled. He tilted his head like he couldn't quite parse what I'd said. Kate whispered, "This is wrong. This is all wrong." And it was. Nothing about the man suggested he was a killer, but the most dangerous people you ever encounter tend to be desperate, and this man was that in spades. He marched towards us, ignoring our orders to get down on the ground. Even in that moment, the thought crossed my mind, I don't want this weighing on Kate's conscience. So when the man raised his gun, I didn't hesitate. Everything went quiet except for the sound of my firearm. Before his body even hit the ground, something wriggled deep inside me, crawling up my throat until it forced its way out. The sick feeling from hearing the man's laugh was only cousin to the disgust and self-loathing that surged in my chest. I giggled. An almost silly, light-headed laugh, like something popped open in my chest, releasing a burst of joy at the gruesome scene in front of me. I clamped my hand over my mouth, but it was too late to stuff it back down. Kate looked at me in horror. I regained my composure, but I could sense another wave coming on. "Need a moment," I mumbled as I shuffled over to the vehicle and climbed in. I cackled for 5 minutes straight before the feeling finally passed. By that point, backup had arrived, and I knew from the way she never took her eyes off me as she told the other officers what happened that Kate was telling them everything. Which was probably for the best, since I couldn't get 2 words out about the incident without giggling. At first, it was only around others. Then it happened whenever I thought of him. His blue eyes made even bluer by the bright red of burst blood vessels surrounding his irises. What was that look? I'd wondered at first. By day 2, I knew what it was. Terror and self-loathing mixed with pleading, begging for someone to make it stop by any means necessary. The department put me on leave. It's standard after an event ends in death, but I could, since they had no plan to bring me back, even if internal affairs later determined the shooting was justified and followed procedure. The psychiatrist they sent me to was sympathetic at first. "Odd reactions to trauma are common," she said when I arrived for our first session, clearly having been informed of the circumstances. "What do you see when the reactions occur?" "His body," I said, dreading the laugh building inside me. "His eyes." I howled for 30 minutes straight, like I'd just heard the funniest thing in the world. The psychiatrist didn't bother asking more questions or scheduling a follow-up. The initial compassion in her voice had disappeared as she told me she was referring me to someone more equipped to treat me and prescribed me something to calm what she described as trauma-induced euphoria. The pills helped to suppress the laughs at first, so long as I could go without speaking, which wasn't hard to do, since no one I reached out to from work wanted anything to do with me. Even Kate had turned, though I think it was more out of the discomfort and the trauma of reliving the shooting than true disgust for me like everyone else. She seemed reluctant to buy into my theories of contagious laughter, but she did tell me the man's name, which was enough for me to track down an address. On day 3, I knocked on his door. His wife opened it, eyes hollowed and puffy from grief. She had no clue who I was until I tried to speak and could only let out a weak giggle. "You're the one who did it, then?" she said. I hung my head in shame, unsure why I was even here or what she could possibly do to help. I felt selfish, like I was burdening someone to ease my own guilt, but I didn't know where else to go. "Come in," she said. I sat in her living room, silent, as she told me what she knew. About 5 days before he died, her husband came home from the bar at 4 a.m. The next morning, she was pissed. He'd driven and wondered why it took him 2 hours to get home after closing, if they only lived 15 minutes away. When he tried to explain, he started laughing. He had to write it down, she said. That was the only way he could tell me. She handed me the piece of paper. The writing was shaky. Clearly, he'd laughed his whole way through the note, but it was legible. I hit someone with my car, but it wasn't my fault. I wasn't even drunk. He ran out of nowhere, like he wanted to die. I don't know why this is happening. I kicked him out. I didn't believe him. Who would? The way he was acting. It felt like the most fucked up way to lie about cheating on your wife. She lit a cigarette and took a long drag before continuing. I only spoke to him once more after. He called me from some cheap motel he was staying at. By that point, I'd seen the news about a hit and run and knew he was telling the truth about that part. She barely noticed as Ash fell to the floor. He said it was a virus or a curse. He couldn't say much beyond that. Just started laughing again. Honestly, I figured he'd completely lost it until you showed up with the same thing. I didn't help him. Left him to deal with it alone. She let out a soft laugh, then looked embarrassed, like it was an unfair gesture to make in front of me. I just told him to turn himself in. I guess he did in a way. I tried to ask a question but could only laugh. She handed me a pad and pen. "What motel?" I wrote. "The one off 11 near the truck stop." I nodded my thanks. "Sorry," I wrote. "Me too," she said. I'd already run out of pills by the time I got to the motel. That much in such a short time span should have killed me, but somehow I felt nothing except the discomfort of laughing steadily again. "Jesus, another one of you," the manager said as I entered. "Y'all with some kind of weird circus, or something?" I suppressed the laughs as best I could as I wrote out my request to see the room the man I killed had stayed in. The manager agreed so long as I paid the overdue bill. I did, and he gave me a key. Inside the room there were pages scattered everywhere. He'd written non-stop, chasing down every connection he could find, trying to make sense of it just as I was. He'd taped news clippings to the wall of 3 deaths prior to his own. The man he'd hit had been hiding after accidentally killing someone in a fistfight. That person had been involved in what was supposedly a deadly domestic dispute. 3 dead bodies, plus his now, and probably a lot more if you could follow the chain back far enough. He'd even try to end it without passing it on. If he couldn't save himself, maybe he could save the next person. But his notes described various failed attempts. The noose broke, the gun jammed, the pills came back up. I told Kate, I thought it was contagious, and my theory had been confirmed. But instead of feeling relief, I felt worse. Knowing the truth was no help. There were no solutions, no answers, only more questions. What was it exactly? How far back did it go? And, most important, was there any way to stop it? The only thing that seemed certain was that there were always 5 days between hosts, which meant I had less than 48 hours to live if the pattern held. His notes eventually became impossible to read, aside from a word here or there. From what I pieced together, the whole thing became intolerable. By the final night, he wasn't sleeping at all. That's the point I'm at now as I write this. The night after the motel, I managed to get tiny pockets of sleep, but instantly I dream of him and wake myself laughing. Last night, I didn't sleep at all. His face is superimposed over my vision at this point. The laughter softens, but it never stops long enough for me to rest. Supposedly, if you go without sleep for long enough, the brain shuts down and you die. I keep telling myself, maybe I can push my body to that point and stop the chain. But I know now I'm not that strong, and judging from the motel notes, I doubt that would work anyway. This thing wants its next host. None of the news outlets had noticed the chain of deaths, so I sent what the man had found to the local paper and Kate. Maybe they'll figure out a way to end it. Or at least have more empathy for the next person it claims. I wasted what little time I had left looking into anything that felt even remotely related. Schoolgirls in the Northeast who'd started laughing one day and couldn't stop, whirling dervishes, laughing cults, contagious PTSD, the 1962 incident in Tanganyika. I wish I had come here sooner. When I Googled it, this place came up as somewhere with answers no one else seems to have. I wish I had come here sooner, if for no other reason than it's nice to have someone believe you. I didn't want to put that burden on the man's wife beyond the help she'd already given, but that meeting with her was my last moment of peace. I'm hoping someone here can help me, because I tried 911 and they think I'm pranking them. They've threatened to send the police if I call again, and I know what happens then. So I'm turning to you, one final ditch effort, before I get to that point. But I'm so tired. So very, very tired. I talked to a man who says he's stuck in an endless cycle and some of the things he talked about are coming true. Let me preface this by saying that I do not know this man. I can't find his name anywhere on social media or in any sort of database. Believe me, I tried. It started last Friday. I was getting ready for Halloween, and I spent most of the day outside carving pumpkins on my porch. My hands were coated in the slimy guts and pumpkin seeds when I saw someone walking down the street. He was tall, about 6'2". He had short, curly hair and a thick beard that seemingly swallowed his lips. He had a button-up flannel shirt, overalls, and a straw hat. He looked like any old farmer that passed by the house on a tractor, so I paid no mind to him until he stopped in front of my house and just stared at me. I did the courteous thing and waved at him, and he waved back in turn. Yet, he didn't budge. "Can I help you?" You always say that." "I'm sorry." "Never mind. Okay?" I went back to the pumpkins, and I started drawing the patterns for the jack-o'-lanterns. I was deep in concentration when I noticed the man was now walking up to me. I put my marker down and spoke. "Change your mind?" "No, but do you mind if I help?" I thought it was odd to have a stranger carve pumpkins with me, but I had bought 12, so I took the help. He was gifted with a knife. He put in an elaborate design that looked exactly like that Spiral Hill scene from The Nightmare Before Christmas. "Wow, that's beautiful," I told him. He smiled as he sat it down next to him. He sighed and said, "You're a nice man, Franklin. Only thing is that I never told him my name." I looked at him and felt unease wash over me, like a bucket of cold water. "How do you know my name?" "I just know these things. I know a lot of things. I know you got 2 dogs. One is a dachshund, and the other is a dachshund, Chihuahua. Your daughters have named them Brat and Taco." "How do?" "I'm not done. You've got a wife named Emily, and today she'll tell you that she's pregnant with a little boy." And on the news, they'll mention that an aerial strike from Russia will have struck the California coast. I laughed at first, expecting him to laugh with me. He had to have been a coworker of my wife's, or a friend of a friend. But he wasn't laughing. He seemed overwhelmed with sadness. Listen, friend, I talk more, but you're making me feel a little weirded out. I think I'll take care of the pumpkins. God damn it, he grumbled, pinching his brow. I'm sorry. I rushed it again. Just let me explain it over coffee. Do you have coffee? I was hesitant. He was odd, but he didn't strike me as a dangerous person. I told him to wait on the porch. My wife asked me who I was talking to, and all I said, it was some guy. I brought out 2 black cups of coffee outside. Steam rolled off their times against the cold air. He smiled as he grabbed his cup. I gave my cup 1 sip and asked, "Well, I'm listening." Right. It's funny. I keep doing this, having this conversation with people. I keep thinking I have enough time on my hands each time I roll back to the beginning. I guess you could say it started when I died. I listened intently and tried to hide my expression of complete bewilderment. Now, I know what you're thinking. I sound like an insane person, but just let me explain. I passed away on July 17th, 2051, 99 years old. I was ready to go home, embrace my Lord and my family. And then I'm in a hospital surrounded by doctors, and I see my mother holding me. So, you were reincarnated? No, reborn. I was back to the year of my birth, but I was full of a lifetime's worth of knowledge. I knew the outcome of so many events, in not just my life, but in history. I tried to change these events, but what? The old man wiped his eyes. Would you believe me if the life you're living right now is the best possible outcome? I thought about the current state of things. War, famine, genocide, poverty, so many awful things. I gave my answer. No. I like to think there's a better life than this. The old man gripped my hand. His palm was callous and rough. I've been lived hundreds of lives. I've tried to change so many of them. But every change leads to something horrible. I tipped the FBI about the 9/11 terror attacks. But you know what happened afterward? The bastards tried again. Went after that year's Super Bowl. Dove the plane right into the stadium. It's like a house of cards. You pluck one thing out, it all goes to shit. I sipped my coffee. The man was obviously insane, so I decided to ask him a question. But before I could ask it, he said, "You're going to ask me what's in hand. You've got 3 pennies and a quarter. Of maybe this time you've grabbed your keys, which has a fidget attached to it. A little clicker, I believe." I put the change back in my pocket and stared at him with a slack-jawed expression. Before I asked him another question, he plucked the words from my lips. "You're gonna ask me for a detail about you only you would know. You had a daughter. Her name was going to be Robin. She was a stillborn." I felt my stomach drop and asked him, "So, what are you exactly? Some sort of fucking time loop sage spouting out advice?" "Listen, I'm not even sure what I am anymore, but all I can do is prepare people." "For what?" "The end of everything. I thought you died at 99. "Not of old age." He drank the rest of his coffee and seized a pumpkin. He extended an open palm to me. "May I?" I handed him a knife, and he started whittling away at the gourd. "Today, Russia will strike the California coast. You mentioned that earlier. When?" He looked at his watch and with heavy eyes he told me, 6 hours from now, you'll get a notification about it soon. And what then? A third world war. It'll be quick. Jesus, what happens? The missiles will fly, and the presidents will point fingers and make claims. But both sides don't have enough humility to end the war to save their own nations. In the end, the people rise up, start killing their leaders in the streets, just like the French Revolution. What about us? Everyone living around here? To be honest, we don't see a lot of conflict outside of the occasional air raid, where we've got to go to storm shelters and bunkers. When the dust settles, things will be good for a while. For a while? Unfortunately, we neglected the planet to the point of no return. Many animals die, coral reefs blackened by oil, smog covers skies. Enjoy the blue sky while you can, because after the war, it ain't coming back. It'll be hard to breathe, and then... He was silent. He dropped the jack-o'-lantern onto the grass and clasped his hands together. The atmosphere starts to erode. By the time I was in the nursing home, I can't even describe it. It's just like the earth we knew, and then it was overtaken by a sudden darkness. That's the last thing I remembered. The screams of terror. And then it all goes black. Why tell me? Why not? I'm here for some reason, and I think it's to help common folk like y'all. It'll be hard, but you'll survive until it's time for the earth to end. I felt a rush, existential fear overtake me. I was beginning to shake, but he took my hand and spoke softly. It's not here yet, but it will be. Be prepared. And then he was gone, like I'd never even met him. I tried looking for him in town, but there's no sign of him. I write this because maybe I should be sharing his message too. If you see him, listen to him. As I'm writing this up, I'm looking at the television showing images of scorched California coastal cities. The president will be speaking in 10 minutes, and the number one thing trending on social media right now is World War III. Even after our conversation, I was hoping he was just some nut who was able to luckily guess some details about my life. But now I know he was telling the truth. God help us, he was right. It was a still, cold night in January. To be exact, Monday, January 20th, 2025. I was house sitting. It was an older home, not ancient by any means, but old. One of those ranch houses that rested in the fields on the outskirts of a small rural town. The house sat at the end of a long dirt road, enclosed by miles of fields. It was a peaceful place, no streetlights, no cars, only stars, and the quiet electrical hum of the porch light. My job was simple. There were 6 dogs, 7 if you included mine, and a pen with some horses on the far side of the yard. I had to feed and water them, of course, and also make sure the dogs stayed out of neighboring properties. They were free range, and with so many fields to explore, they were living the best life a dog could live. But when dusk came, I had to round them up. Across the yard from the house stood an old wooden barn, and in that barn was a cattle trailer full of straw. That was where the dogs were to be locked up for the night. It sounded simple enough, but with 7 dogs on a property of who knows how many acres, it wasn't the easiest task. I had just finished my dinner when I decided I'd better look for them. I'd been scrolling on my phone for some time, and when my attention finally left the screen, the house was much darker than I realized. I put on my boots, opened the screen door, and headed out into the cold evening air. The sun had just set and was shedding the last of its light on the nearby mountaintops. The tallest peak glowed pink and orange, along with the clouds above. It looked beautiful, piercing the sky across the endless sea of farmland. To tell the truth, I was staring off at the scene for some time before the silence was broken by a distant howl. With one howl came another, and soon a whole pack of coyotes filled the air with their mournful cries. I knew then I'd best get those dogs. It didn't take much calling before rounding up most of them. My dog answered my calls first, running enthusiastically across the yard, then another and another. Soon I had all but Lewis. That's when I heard, across the field, behind the barn, distant howls turned to growls, and then the growls became shrieks. With fingers crossed, praying that it was a coyote dying and not Lewis, I hopped into my truck. Quickly, I swung open the old metal gate behind the barn and headed down the ditch bank. By that time, the sky's light had faded, and all that could be seen was the 2 square feet of ground my headlights kept lit. I was beginning to feel a little spooked. As I looked the best I could at what little I could see, I listened for more howls. I couldn't hear much more than the squeaky timing belt. After a few more minutes of driving and calling out Lewis, I headed back to the house feeling defeated. If that dumb dog died on my watch, it wouldn't be long before I'd have lost that job, let alone get paid. But against all odds, the stupid mutt was sitting by the barn door, innocently wagging his tail when I pulled the truck back in the yard. Relieved, I opened the door and threw him in the cattle trailer. Then, in the dull light of my flashlight, I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then again, to ensure I had done my job. They were all there, squinting up at my light with curious eyes. I locked the trailer door, went out of the barn, and headed across the yard for the house. It was getting late by then, and I was ready to call it a day, so I took off my boots and shirt and jumped in bed. Little did I know, the night was not over. After a few minutes of doom scrolling, I decided I'd better set my alarm and call it a day. I checked the time as I placed my phone down for the night 10:47 p.m. Not bad compared to the last few nights. I'd get a good 7 hours of sleep, or so I thought. I had just begun to drift off when I heard it again. A distant howl pierced the silence, followed by another, and soon all the dogs in the trailer joined in the choir of dimwit K9S. Annoyed, I began to wonder if I had really gotten all the dogs rounded up. I did count them twice, so they must all be there. But did I close the gate behind the barn? I couldn't remember. I had to go make sure. Reluctantly, I got back out of bed, put on my coat and boots, and headed out the door. They had stopped their howling when I stepped outside. It was only the porch light's lonely electric hum that accompanied the sound of my footsteps. With heavy eyelids, I walked toward the barn when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head to see a man on the far side of the yard walking the opposite direction of me. Startled, I stopped and turned my attention to him. In an almost mirror-like fashion, he did the same. As my eyes focused on him, I realized he wasn't just some random guy. He was me. Confused, I took a step toward the barn. At the same time, he took a step toward the house. I was so startled I woke up in a cold sweat. Guess I had gotten some sleep after all, sleep with some acid trip dreams. It took me a minute to settle down again, but after scrolling on Instagram for some time, I began to feel tired, and so I went back to sleep. It wasn't until what felt like a couple of hours later that I woke up again to the irritating howls of the coyotes and cattle dogs. What is their problem? Why at 5 in the morning? I thought to myself in anger. I grabbed my phone to check the time, and after reading it once, I had to turn it off and check again. It read 10:47 p.m. Just then, I heard another sound, join in with the now haunting howls, a low metal creak, a distinct creaking I remembered well, the sound of the big metal gate opening behind the barn.